Transmitter 42. It's that time of year where the National Football League playoffs commence. Let's spend some time discussing the playoff structure and format, the bracket itself, and teams to watch. Today's guest, Dylan Huggins, is a 5-year offensive line veteran of college Division III football. To say he knows the game is an understatement. He shares his knowledge with this preface to the NFL playoffs. Please welcome Dylan Huggins to Transmitter 42. Well, thank you for joining us, Dylan.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself real quick.
Well, so as you already mentioned previously in the intro, 5-year member of the Hampton Sydney football team. So not Division I or anything, but I'd like to think of myself as, individual who's been around the game a pretty long time and with various experiences. And I've seen a lot of knowledge through, various coaches I've been played under. So excited to be here today and share my thoughts on the NFL playoffs and what will unfold this season.
Well, welcome and thank you for joining Transmitter 42. Let's start with the introduction and a brief overview of the NFL playoff structure.
So this is now, I want to say it's the 5th season where we have now the 7th seed added to the NFL playoffs. Beforehand, it was a little bit different of a structure. You had 6 total teams in each conference, 1 through 6 seeds in each conference. But what was different was in that old format, the top 2 seeds in each conference both got a first-round bye, unlike this year where it's just the top seed in each conference, which I think is a lot better because, well, with an extra team in the playoffs, you're getting an extra game, which, I don't think anybody's going to complain about. And with only one team in each conference getting a bye, it's more rewarding, and it pushes teams to really fight for that number 1 seed, whereas in the old format 4 to 5 years ago, if you just got a 1 or 2 seed, you get the bye. So it was just less competitive.
What are we going to expect in this episode?
So in this episode, I'm gonna highlight my playoff predictions after seeing the regular season play out. Who I think is playing good right now, who I think is trending downwards, and I'm also gonna highlight some key players on these teams. What are the X factors for various teams to succeed, and how other teams can combat those X factors. And yeah.
Let's go over the overview of the playoff format.
So 24-25 playoffs. I'm going to start with the AFC. Top seeded.
AFC for the listeners is what?
American Football Conference. And then top seed, to, I guess, many people's unsurprise, is the Kansas City Chiefs. Only had 2 losses on the season, and with just 2 losses, if you're just looking at the record itself, you're thinking, oh, they're poised for a three-peat. But they do have one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history, Patrick Mahomes, who this season really he's played uncharacteristic of what what we're accustomed to seeing. He hasn't been bad by any means, but he's definitely taken, I'd say, a step back from what he's capable of playing and what we're used to. Obviously, the Kansas City Chiefs now, where they're different now as opposed to when Patrick Mahomes first came into the league, was their defense is now, one could say, and in my opinion, the defense is the backbone. When Patrick Mahomes first came into the league, it was heavy reliant on the play calling of head coach Andy Reid, the talent, Patrick Mahomes, future Hall of Famers, Travis Kelce at tight end, and Tyreek Hill at wide receiver, who Tyreek Hill is now in the Dolphins, but that's another story. But now the defense in the last few seasons has been a wrecking ball of a unit. They've got talent on all phases of the defense, stopping the run. Another future Hall of Famer, Chris Jones, defensive tackle, the best defensive lineman in the NFL, and he has been for a couple of years now. And they've got great talent, just all over the defense, stopping the run, defending the pass. Like guys like Trent McDuffie at corner. They're even losing valuable pieces this past offseason. So just cornerback L'Jarius Sneed, it still didn't really affect their defensive play at all. They were still they contained teams no matter what the game plan was, and that was the reason why they were able to have so much success this year. It's not that they were blowing teams out of the water, just dumping a bunch of points on them. It was they were winning. They weren't really blowing anybody out this year, but they were just limiting offensive play, and scores were close all year for the most part, but their defense was the main centerpiece. And Patrick Mahomes, even though down year for him, some would say, but in the big moments, he still came through when it mattered most. Moving on to Buffalo. Buffalo's an intriguing team because they've had Josh Allen at quarterback for a number of years now, and Josh Allen is one of the quarterbacks. There's very few quarterbacks in the NFL that are classified as, I would say, elevators. I would say there's only about 5 elevators, and what I mean by that is I classify an elevator as a quarterback that doesn't need a specific system to work in and orchestrate the offense in. Elevators are quarterbacks that are, regardless of the situation, they can elevate talent around them, and even if that includes sometimes coaching liabilities. Patrick Mahomes also falls into that category. But Buffalo this year, to me, obviously in the last few years, they have ran into the Kansas City Chiefs every season, besides one to the Bengals, and they have come up short each time in the playoffs. And a lot of people thought last year was their year because it was going to be played on Buffalo's terms. It was in Buffalo in the AFC divisional round last year against the Chiefs in Buffalo. And everybody was thinking, oh, this is the Bills' finally their chance to, get over the hump and finally get past the Chiefs, because many people just thought if they got past the Chiefs, they could win the whole thing. Yeah, so Buffalo Bills, I think a big thing that helped them this offseason was they had to get former wide receiver, now on the Texans, Stephon Diggs, out of the locker room. I really think I thought he was a bit of a locker room cancer. And specifically after last season, they lost to the Chiefs at home. Stephon Diggs whining to the media and saying all this and that. But he himself played horrible in that game. And there was a deep ball to Diggs that would have been a huge gain. And he just went right through his hands. So I think it was good for Josh Allen and the Bills to get him out of there. And Josh Allen this year has been playing at an MVP caliber level as opposed to seasons like he's always been an uplifter of talent around him, but he's limited his turnovers this year significantly, and I just think he's a lot more poised and there's less drama in the locker room. Moving on to the 3-seeded Baltimore Ravens, the winners of the AFC North. They themselves have another MVP candidate, and it's almost going to be like the MVP is going to be almost like a pick 'em between Lamar Jackson, quarterback of the Ravens, and Josh Allen for the Bills. Lamar Jackson is spectacular, and this team is spectacular. Coach John Harbaugh for the Ravens, he's been doing it a long time, and he's really he had a good team last year, but I think the defense this year has much improved. His pass defense stopping the run, and Lamar Jackson has played, ironically, way better this season than he did last season when he won his second MVP last year, which is, in my opinion, a pretty weak MVP, considering, the historical frame we have of what an MVP is. But the Ravens matching up here, first round rivalry game, AFC North matchup against the Pittsburgh Steelers. And Pittsburgh's been a pretty interesting situation the last couple of years, because ever since Ben Roethlisberger retired, they do not have a quarterback. They have not had a quarterback. Now this year they picked up Russell Wilson as a rental, I would assume. And he's had spurts this year where he's looked very good. But other games where it's looking back to, it looks like, the Denver Broncos, Russell Wilson. So the Pittsburgh Steelers defense ever since Mike Tomlin has been the head coach, which has been, forever now, their defense has always been, top of the league, and it remains to be that. Even in these past few years where the offense just lacks coaching, proper schemes, talent, specifically at quarterback, lack of a running game. They relied on their defense so much that it masked, and it produced a reasonable record. Mike Tomlin's never had a losing season in his tenure, ever. Now, people might think there's no problems at all, but last 5-ish years, it's just the defense that's pretty much bailing out the offense. I mean, the defense is elite. There's no question. Alex Highsmith, TJ Watt at defensive end, at edge, they're going to have their way getting pressure on the quarterback. It's going to come down to, Pittsburgh will never, hate to say this, but Pittsburgh will never be able to advance on a deep playoff run until they figure it out at quarterback and on offense. The defense is amazing, and it has been. But you need to score points in the National Football League, which it's going to be a rough. I think it'll be a very rough game against the Ravens, because the Ravens are one of the most, I would say, top 2 or 3 in terms of balance on both sides of the football, offense and defense. So they wear that Pittsburgh defense out. It could be a long day. Next team up is Houston Texans, winners of the AFC South. Now, this division was, in my opinion, the most disappointing team the disappointing division in the entire NFL this year. Houston Texans last year, rookie quarterback C.J. Stroud had an amazing rookie campaign, and no one had any expectations for them to make the playoffs last year, and even winning a playoff game last year. This season, they have dealt with some injuries, and obviously losing Tank Dell. He had a pretty gruesome knee injury against the Chiefs a few weeks back, and there's a good chance he's not coming back next season. But this team just doesn't. They struggle running the football. They struggle in pass protection. The defense, they are good on edge at getting pressure. Will Anderson, they have a good presence to attack the quarterback, but this defense really struggles in the pass. They do have a stud cornerback in Derek Stingley, and Derek Stingley has, he was I believe he was drafted third overall. He was a third overall pick, if I'm not mistaken, out of LSU, and he was, a stud at LSU back when he was playing with Joe Burrow and company at LSU, and they won the Natty. And
What's the Natty?
The national championship. And he struggled with injuries coming in, but he seems to be, in the secondary, seems to be the lone stud in my eyes. And, they're facing up against the Los Angeles Chargers, who finished second in the AFC West to the Chiefs. The Los Angeles Chargers, I mean, it was a year that raised a lot of question with former Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh making a return to the NFL. And there was, I guess you could say, somewhat of an expectation because, Harbaugh's had success in the NFL before, coming off a national championship win in college last year against Washington and leaving to make a return to the NFL. People were expecting, I would say, kind of just like an average first year, like middle of the road, nothing crazy. If you missed the playoffs, people wouldn't, scold or ridicule you. But you really exceeded expectations there. They had a great draft. They drafted two guys that drafted a tackle, Joe Alt from Notre Dame. He's been a stud for them. And Ladd McConkey, wide receiver out of Georgia, has 1,000 yards on the year as a rookie. And they also have, Justin Herbert, working with Harbaugh has helped him tremendously. Justin Herbert's another one of those quarterbacks that I talked about earlier that's an uplifter of talent because the Chargers lack a consistent running game as of right now. They don't necessarily have... They have a good defense. I won't say a great defense. They have a good defense. They lack talent, I would say, at the receiver position. I did mention Ladd McConkey, but outside of Ladd McConkey, it's very wishy-washy, I would say. They have another former first-round pick, Quentin Johnston, who out of TCU, and he just hasn't lived up to the prior expectation. But I believe that, and I think this is kind of scary, this will be the worst season in the Harbaugh tenure on the Chargers, which I think is pretty scary because there was no expectation for this team to make the postseason at all. And I think the fact that he did it with this roster as it is right now should be a wake-up call to the rest of the league that Harbaugh and the Chargers they're going to be here to stay in the future. So, and then the last team I will talk about is the Denver Broncos, another team out of the AFC West, finishing third behind the Chargers and Chiefs. Rookie quarterback Bo Nix, who has played, I would say, a lot. I think a lot of people didn't really expect him to do all that in the NFL. I think a lot of people expected him. A lot of people didn't think he would spending a first round. The Broncos spending a first round pick on him would be very worthwhile, but he's not doing anything crazy. But he is, he's doing his job. He's running the system that head coach Sean Payton has put in front of him. They do have a stud offensive line, especially in pass protection. but their running game and their running game schemes are pretty terrible. They're not good. They struggle running the football. And the defense it's kind of a similar situation with the Pittsburgh Steelers. This defense is, sensational. Best cornerback in the NFL, and Patrick Surtain out of Alabama. He is, sensational. This defense has really taken a drastic turn since last season. Last season they were bottom 10 in the NFL, and now they've climbed to the top 2. So it's another one of those situations where the defense is elite, similar to the Steelers, but will the offense be able to do enough? Now, I do think the Denver offense is better than the Pittsburgh offense. I wouldn't say by a crazy amount because, like I said, quarterback Bo Nix right now, he's not asked to do a lot. It's a lot of dinking and dunking to receivers. He's not really throwing the ball down the field. I don't know if that's a trust thing as of right now, or if he's still, he's just running the system that Coach Sean Payton has out in front of him. But, he has had moments this year where he's grown and improved throughout the year. So that's all the teams in the AFC. I'm going to make my picks here for first I'm going to highlight what I think is going to be the best game. And then a game that I think is going to get out of hand.
In the AFC.
In the AFC, correct. Best game, I think, even though I'm going to say it's going to be, I think it could be Buffalo-Denver, honestly. Or I think Houston and the Chargers could be good as well. But Buffalo-Denver, I think it's a better matchup for Denver against Buffalo than Houston against the Chargers. I think Denver, although they might not win this game, which I did not pick Denver to win this game, I think they could definitely make it interesting with the defense that they have. Trying to limit Josh Allen to extend plays. They have the best cornerback in the NFL. I think it's a pretty low scoring game, and it's just going to come down to, will Denver be able to move the ball on Buffalo, which we will see. Game that I think is going to get out of hand, and it's going to be Baltimore-Pittsburgh. In Baltimore, the way Lamar Jackson for the Ravens has played this year, the way the team is structured, great offense, great defense, great run game. Derrick Henry at running back, rushing just shy of 2,000 yards on the season at age 30. Baltimore's poised to make a push. And I just don't see the Steelers offense being able to sustain drives against that defense. And I think there's a chance Baltimore struggles early, possibly moving the football against that Steeler defense. I could see the score being fairly low scoring at halftime. I could see Baltimore maybe being up by 7, but I see the second half. I think Baltimore pulls away in the second half. And then I got the Chargers on the road at Houston beating the Texans. Have not liked the way the Texans have looked this season. I just don't think they're going to be able to. Their offensive line is pretty terrible there as a whole, and I just don't think quarterback CJ Stroud for the Texans is going to have enough time. Is going to have enough time to get the ball out to his playmakers. Chargers, good defense. And I got the Chargers moving on. And then Baltimore, I said. And the Buffalo Denver game, like I mentioned earlier, I think it's closer. It's a lot closer than people think. I do have Buffalo winning due to quarterback. Well, Josh Allen's been here before. He's been in these playoff games, these types of situations. I think he finds a way to elevate, and they pull that game out. I could see a score like 24-17, 24-14, maybe around those lines. I think it's a pretty competitive game. So in the next round, as I mentioned, well, I don't think I actually mentioned this. So in this format that we've had for about 4 or 5 years now, we have the lowest remaining seed of the first round would play the top seed, in this case the Chiefs. So with those picks, I have the Chargers on the road to the Chiefs, and Chargers are in a great spot for the future, but going into Arrowhead is a tough place to play in the playoffs, and I just don't think they're going to be ready for it. I don't think it's a high scoring affair. Like I mentioned earlier, the Chiefs defense, I just think the Chiefs defense will find a way to neutralize, maybe not neutralize, but severely hinder Justin Herbert and the Chargers offense. So I have the Chiefs moving on to play in yet another AFC Conference Championship. And then this one could be the game. I think this game coming up could be probably the best game of the entire playoffs. And it's in the second round, which is kind of crazy, but Baltimore and Buffalo. I think this game will be, if it ends up playing, if both these teams meet up, I think it'll be the best game of the playoffs. And it's kind of crazy to say in the second round, but I think this game is just going to come down to quarterback play. It's going to be Lamar Jackson versus Josh Allen. And I think Josh Allen has more of a chip on his shoulder than previous years. I do like the Ravens defense more than the Bills defense. But this is just me. I'm putting a little more faith in Josh Allen than I am Lamar Jackson, because although Josh Allen has not made it to a Super Bowl, neither has Lamar Jackson, but although Josh Allen hasn't been to a Super Bowl, I've seen Josh Allen play a lot better in the postseason than Lamar has. So when the stage is set bright, what quarterback are you going to put your trust in? I'm putting mine in Josh Allen, and I have Buffalo moving on in a dogfight. So that will bring us to the AFC Championship game. We got the Kansas City Chiefs and the Buffalo Bills, familiar foes in the postseason, and it would be an Arrowhead. And
so that's your pick
for the AFC Champion. Yeah.
Got it.
And this is kind of what I'm thinking right here. Patrick Mahomes has a chance to go down as the greatest quarterback ever. I still think it's Brady right now, but he has the chance, and he's on trajectory to do so. When Tom Brady was playing, went to numerous Super Bowls, obviously, but there were the years where, some quarterbacks just got the better of them, Big Ben. Big Ben had his years where he got the better. And then Drew Brees had a year. All these other quarterbacks, Aaron Rodgers had a year. All these other quarterbacks had, years. Peyton Manning especially. All those quarterbacks, have years where it's, they finally get one. They finally break through. And with the way Josh Allen's been playing and Patrick Mahomes has been playing, it's hard to go against Patrick Mahomes in these types of situations because we know what we've seen and the way that defense is. But I'm rolling with Josh Allen and the Bills. Josh Allen, I think he's played fantastic this season, better than Patrick Mahomes. And I think Josh Allen finally breaks through and gets to the Super Bowl. He's been, trying for a while. They haven't beaten the Chiefs in the playoffs, and they've matched up 3 times, those 2 quarterbacks. But I'm taking the Bills in this one. I think the Bills finally get it done. And they have a little sigh of relief for the time being. So, Bills are my AFC representative in the Super Bowl. Moving on to the NFC.
National Football Conference.
That's correct. And
remember, some listeners are learning about football from you.
That's true. That's true. The NFC is a lot different than the AFC. I think the AFC has better quarterbacks, but the NFC has better, more structured teams, more talent around. With these quarterbacks in the NFC are not necessarily uplifters, like I've mentioned in the AFC, like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert. Quarterbacks in the NFC just aren't to the talent level as those AFC guys.
So there's better balance typically. I remember growing up, the same thing. It was like the NFC was more of a grind it and get it done sort of thing, and the AFC was legendarily score lots of points more than your opponent scores on you. Try to win that way. So focus on offense.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's the NFC. It's the quarterbacks in the NFC in my opinion, aren't asked to do as much. They're not asked to uplift a situation, And the number 1 seed, the Detroit Lions. Detroit Lions, they have really burst onto the scene because historically, terrible franchise. And I think even Lions fans would even say that.
With a few exceptions. I do remember in the late 80s or early 90s, they were dogging with the Redskins, trying to get through the playoffs.
That's true, but they've never even reached the Super Bowl. So but this is, some would argue that the talent they have now is like the best talent they've had in a while, because there was a span where they were just bottom of the league, early draft picks, couldn't pan out, head coach Dan Campbell came there in 2021. Or that was his first season. He got the coaching position at a team that was pretty terrible. I want to say they won maybe 3 or 4 games when he arrived. And his first year there was not great, but it was, as we've seen across these last few years, they've steadily improved and pretty quick and drastically. And then his second year, they went 9-8, and they didn't make the playoffs. But as a Packers fan, the last game of the season, in the last year Aaron Rodgers played in Green Bay at Lambeau Field, was against the Lions, and all the Packers had to do were they just had to win and they were in. They didn't have to rely on other teams winning or other teams losing to get in. All they had to do was take care of business, and they were in. And the Lions at this point were already eliminated, and so theoretically they're not playing for anything. But Dan Campbell, the culture he's installed there in Detroit, they're going to go play hard, no matter the circumstance, no matter what the occasion is, if they're in the playoffs, out of the playoffs, whatever. And they beat the Packers. And that was the moment I knew. I was like, there's a new giant that is coming in the NFC. And last year they were just shy of a Super Bowl appearance. Probably should have won the game NFC Championship last year against the 49ers. Horrific second half. This year, they have been very dominant in games, scoring lots of points. And it's the best offensive line unit in the NFL. They can just have their way with, it seems like, any defensive front. They just find a way to run the ball. They have a great running back, Jahmyr Gibbs from Alabama. They're great at wide receiver. The only red flag I would have with the Lions is the injuries they've sustained throughout the course of the year. They've lost pieces in the secondary, in the safeties and corners. So pass defense at times can be shaky in this back end of the season, this back half of the season. And they also lost their star pass rusher, Aiden Hutchinson, earlier on in the season. He had a pretty gruesome leg injury against the Cowboys. But even with all those injuries, they've still found a way to be dominant, which is pretty amazing. And with all those injuries, you got to give a lot of credit to defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn for the Lions. He's done an amazing job given all the injuries that have taken place, and after this season, he will have a decision to make if he wants to stay, or he most certainly is going to be offered a head coaching position somewhere where I have no idea, but it'll be one of these bad teams that will be searching for a head coach, and Aaron Glenn will definitely be one of the candidates. And then the second seed for the number 2 seed in the NFC is the Philadelphia Eagles. Philadelphia Eagles are, I believe, to be the front runner for the Super Bowl. I think they have it all. I think they are my Super Bowl pick. Reason being, the offensive line is still elite, even without Jason Kelce. Getting Saquon Barkley at running back, he was just shy of breaking the all-time record for rushing yards in the season, but he didn't play in the last game because he didn't need to, and the Eagles had already clinched their playoff seeding. So Saquon Barkley rushing for over 2,000 yards behind an elite offensive line, an elite defense, I believe to be the best. It might be the best defense in the NFL. I would say definitely the best defensive line. Their run stopping ability is insane. And secondary, their defensive backs are just sensational. Quinyon Mitchell, rookie out of Toledo, been a stud. Cooper DeJean, rookie out of Iowa, stud. I think that team has it all. And even while Jalen Hurts, the quarterback, some people don't. Some people think he's better than he is. Some people think he's worse than he is. I personally think he's a good quarterback, but he's one of those quarterbacks that he has to have pieces around him, and he has probably I would say he's got the best supporting cast out of any quarterback in the NFL, including the defense, if you're including that. So he's not asked to do that much. And that's not like a knock on him or anything, but he's just not asked to do in a game what these other quarterbacks, like, for example, in the AFC, have to do with less of an arsenal surrounding them. He's got an elite wide receiver 1. He's got a great wide receiver 2. He's got a good tight end, good offensive line, best running back in football. And the defense, and he's got everything. So I think the Eagles are going to be very tough to stop in these playoffs. 3 seed, we have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. who it was a weird year for Tampa Bay and that division, the AFC South or the NFC South as a whole. Many people didn't think Tampa Bay would even be in this position this year. Made the playoffs last year. Many people thought it was a fluke. Got a playoff win against the Eagles. Many people thought it was fluky. And this year, the heavy favorite to win their division was the Atlanta Falcons, with Kirk Cousins leaving Minnesota and coming to Atlanta. And he was offered. The Atlanta Falcons situation is not great right now because they got Kirk Cousins to come down there for, I want to say it was like about 160 million guaranteed, and then he ended up getting benched in the last few games of the season. He was unplayable. He was not good. So they had to resort to first round draft pick Michael Penix to play quarterback, who I think has looked pretty good in his own right. But the team was it was inconsistent all season, and huge disappointment as a whole. Tampa Bay's got a great offense. They do. They have a great offensive line. They have a great running back. They have a good running game. And Baker Mayfield at quarterback, who I'm a big fan of his because he's kind of revived his career. Being drafted to the Browns and then went to the Panthers. It was looking pretty bad. He was not looking great. But he got into a situation where he had, he's got good coaching and a good offensive line. He's got a future Hall of Famer wide receiver, Mike Evans. And he's, Baker Mayfield, he's not one of these. He's also, we use the term system quarterback. You got to have system quarterbacks have to have, the right situation around them to succeed in the league, which is
versus the elevator.
Correct. Yeah, like where I was talking about, the AFC has got more elevators at quarterback, and the NFC's got the system guys. But I think their offense is enough to get them in a position to win some games. They could go on a run. Is it super likely? No, but we'll see. And then the LA Rams, winners of the NFC West. NFC West had a very weird season. The San Francisco 49ers last couple of years have been by far the most dominant team in that conference or in that division, but took a severe step back this year. Dealt with a lot of injuries though, like a crazy amount of injuries. And then the Rams, the Rams were solid. Like they got a good team, but I've watched them this season and I don't see any consistency with them. They've got great offensive pieces. Like Matthew Stafford, Super Bowl winner. He's proven in the league. He's got good wide receivers. Puka Nacua and Cooper Kupp. They have a good running back. And they do have a really good defensive line with two rookies actually, both from Florida State, Braden Fisk and Jared Verse, who have really taken that defensive line up several notches. I think the Rams are a sneaky team, but for these playoffs, but I just don't see them beating their opponent in the first round and the 5 seed, the Minnesota Vikings. And unfortunately for the Vikings, they are a wild card team. They did not win their division because they finished second to the Detroit Lions. And they're the only team in NFL history to win 14 games. Finished 14-3, win 14 games, and have to go on the road for their first playoff game, which kind of sucks. Because any other division, they're winning the division. It's just how it goes. but they lost to Detroit twice. And, that's a rough situation. But Minnesota is a great football team. They have elite coaching on both sides. Kevin O'Connell, the head coach, the play caller. Brian Flores, defensive coordinator. Brian Flores has some of the best schemes for blitzing the quarterback out of anybody. Just period. Similar to Tampa Bay, the quarterback situation there is another revived career. Sam Darnold, who was drafted 2018, I believe, by the New York Jets, was looking pretty bad, was not looking good. Also went to the Panthers, was not looking good, and then he finally got into a situation where he's got the tools around him. He's got the play caller. He's got the offensive line. He's got the receivers. He's got a great defense. So he's not asked to do, like you said, he's not asked to uplift. He's asked to, just execute the offense. Nothing crazy, But he's played very well this year. So kind of cool to see him similar to Baker Mayfield last year for the Buccaneers. Kind of cool to see, these careers revive when they were looking pretty bad early on when they were younger. And then 6th seed, your team, good old Washington. Pretty cool to see Washington back in the postseason. They made the postseason during the COVID season, but it just wasn't the same. And also they had a losing record. It was kind of like won the division by default. This year, though, although they didn't win the division because unfortunately they're accompanied with the Philadelphia Eagles, it's cool to see them turn it around, and they really hit on their rookie quarterback, Jaden Daniels out of LSU, the Heisman Trophy winner in college last year. He's been sensational. He's some might say a similar, play style to Lamar Jackson. Great rusher at quarterback. He rushed for, I think, just shy of 900 yards this year, which is crazy for, a rookie and a quarterback. And he's been great passing the football as well. Their offense has just taken a crazy leap this year. And under head coach Dan Quinn, that team has really come alive this year. And as opposed to past years where it's just seemed like, all hope is lost. Because, they went from last year, they had a bottom pick. They were pretty terrible last year. I don't remember how many games they won, but drastic turnaround this year, impressive turnaround, and excited to see what they do in the future. And then the last team I got here is my pride and joy Green Bay Packers, who they're interesting because they have not beaten an elite team this year. And some might say, oh, so they're a fraud. And I would say they're definitely not going to win their first round matchup because they're going to be playing the Eagles. But all these teams that they've lost to, they finished 11-6, lost to the Lions twice, lost to the Vikings twice, and lost to the Eagles. And unfortunately lost to the Bears in the last week of the season. Don't really want to talk about that. It was pretty embarrassing. But
well, where do the Bears fit in all this?
Chicago Bears, so they won 5 games all year.
Did they beat Green Bay?
They haven't beat the Packers since 2018. But
any given day, right?
Any given day, that's true. That's the same with the playoffs. It's any given day. They haven't, all those elite teams they lost to, they didn't get blown out in any of them. They were all competitive. They were all close, dogfights. But at the end of the day, it just comes down to, those games that are close like that, are your players going to rise to the occasion? Is your coach going to rise to the occasion? So, unfortunately, seeing that theme of not rising to the occasion play out all year doesn't install much hope for the Packers to make it out of the first round against the Philadelphia Eagles. So my NFC bracket predictions on this side of the bracket. I think the most exciting game actually is going to be Tampa Bay, Washington. Because I have Tampa Bay winning this game, mainly because I think it's going to be a shootout game. Because both the offenses are very good. I think it's going to be a shootout, and it's going to be fun to watch. I give Tampa Bay the nod just because they've been here before and they've done it. This is kind of like Washington's like first rodeo in a sense, in a while. So, they made the playoffs in the COVID year, but that was a completely different team than it is now. So, I think it's close. Would I be surprised if Washington won? Not necessarily, but I am picking Tampa here, and I think that's going to be the best game of the NFC's first round. A game I think could potentially get ugly would be Philadelphia and Green Bay. I would love for the Packers to beat the Eagles. I just don't see it happening in Philly with the amount of talent Philadelphia has. I don't think the Packers are going to be able to stop the running attack of Saquon Barkley, and I don't think that the Packers are going to be able to move the ball very well on that Eagles defense, especially the Packers. If they want a shot in this game, they're going to have to establish the run early, which establishing the run against that Philly defensive line is going to be very difficult. So I think that game goes one of two ways. I think either the Eagles run the Packers out of the building, out of the stadium, or Packers pull off a miracle and barely win it. I don't really think there's any in between. So I got Philly moving on there. And then the Rams-Minnesota game. Minnesota is definitely the better team here, top to bottom. It's in LA. Well, actually, now it's switched to Arizona because of the wildfires in LA. They're playing in Arizona now. So I actually think that game's going to be pretty close. I got Minnesota moving on. But I think Minnesota's a pretty good favorite. But I wouldn't be surprised if that's a dogfight either. I think Stafford will find a way to maybe even though I don't think they'll win the game, I think they compete throughout, and they're there with Minnesota. But I do have the Vikings moving on. So we have the Vikings moving on to play Detroit, and you would think right now that Minnesota would be the better team because the defense seems to be better than Detroit's. But in the last week of the season, they played each other for the division and for the number one seed. Detroit pretty much had their way, especially in the second half of the second half of the game. And it's going to be up to Minnesota to make adjustments, watch that game, look at the film. Detroit, although missing so much on defense in that game, they applied lots of pressure on the quarterback on Sam Darnold at quarterback, and he was not able to make completions and was not able to stay in the pocket. And it got out of hand in that game. I think this time around, I have Detroit winning this game. I think it's a lot closer than the last matchup, I think Minnesota will adjust and get the ball out sooner if the Detroit still tries to bring constant pressure. I do have Detroit winning, but I think it's a dogfight game, and I think Minnesota. And would I be shocked if Minnesota wins? I would not, because Minnesota's a really good football team. But I got Detroit winning that. Moving on to the NFC Championship. And then Tampa Bay on the road to the Eagles. Now, it's Tampa Bay. I'm sorry. You get your first round playoff win, but I just don't see a going on the road to Philly and competing with those boys over there. I just don't think you're going to be able to. I don't think Tampa's going to be able to. Their defense is definitely not going to be able to stop the Eagles, in my opinion, and they won't be able to have as much success moving the football. I think that game, although in the second round, has potential to be pretty ugly as well. So I got the Eagles advancing to the NFC Championship game, traveling on the road to Detroit. And I got Philadelphia winning this one because I think the defense that Philly has is pretty unmatched. They're top to bottom, I think probably the best unit in the league. And I think Detroit, Jared Goff specifically, at quarterback, is going to have trouble. I think they're going to apply pressure on him, and I think he's going to, A, not have a good pocket, or B, I just don't think that there's going to be a lot open down the field against that Philly defense, that Philly secondary. I think Philly actually takes it. I could see it by 10, even though it's in Detroit. I think Philly takes that game, takes a good hold on that game early, and then they never look back.
We have about a minute left.
Well, that brings us to the Super Bowl. Got Buffalo and Philly.
Buffalo and Philly. Wow.
Yeah. And, you want to pick Buffalo. I would love it for Josh Allen, but I just think I don't think that Buffalo top to bottom I don't think Josh Allen's going to be able to uplift the situation enough against this Philly team. Philly's top to bottom just complete in all facets. And I got Philadelphia taking the 2025 Lombardi Trophy. It's the Bills.
Okay, Dylan. Well, thanks so much for your keen insights on the NFL and the status this year. I hope everyone has their own predictions that we can all compare results later on after the big game is finally over. Thank you, Dylan, for being on Transmitter 42.
Thank you for having me. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to the Transmitter 42 podcast. Since its beginning, we've covered tech, sports, and health. If you would like to send us feedback or suggestions, please email us at radioshow@t42.am or send a note via U.S. mail to Transmitter 42 LLC, P.O. Box 100, Remington, Virginia 22734. This show is transmitted 8 p.m. Eastern every Tuesday on WBCQ at a frequency of 7490 kilohertz. Please visit www.wbcq.com for more details on this and many other programs and frequencies. All of our podcasts are available for your favorite player. Visit t42.am for our catalog. For more ham radio information, especially about antennas, please visit www.hamradio.me, Mary Elizabeth. For engineering discussions, please visit www.cosjwt.com. Thanks for listening. Transmitter 42.